Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Internationalie podcast. Before we start, let me talk a little bit about the podcast. So, the Internationalie podcast is going to be a space where different international students, prospective ones, as well as current international students, could get a glimpse into the life of international students in the US or abroad. This week, I am joined by my very different Makeda. Welcome to the show, Makeda.
Hi, Ruth. How are you?
I'm good. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. So before we dive into the conversation, let me talk a little bit about you. So Makeda was born in Houston, Texas, and moved to Addis Ababa when she was 10 years old. Once she finished high school, she attended Rice University in Houston, Texas, where she studied economics. She's currently working as an associate in Agro Processing with the Tony Blair Institute. Would you like to add more to your bio?
I think you got it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a
All
good
right.
summary to start with.
Yeah. So, as the topic of our conversation today is dealing with dating and relationships, what is the first thing that comes to your mind when you hear the word dating and relationships?
Isn't that a loaded topic? That's what I think.
I know. I've been trying to do this topic for a while now, so I'm very excited that we're finally doing it.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure not a lot of people are comfortable talking about dating and relationship. So I guess that's the first thing that comes to mind. I guess that we don't openly share a lot about our dating and personal life in general. I think culturally that's kind of our norm going on.
Right.
But also, I think that the other thing that I think of is how different, I guess, dating and relationships are in Ethiopia versus the US as well.
Exactly. No, yeah, you're right. I mean, even for me personally, when I think of the word dating and relationships, I mean, as you said, because we don't talk about it so openly, it's like like a taboo, to even discuss something like this. But at the same time, it is very relevant and people go through this. And, I don't know why people don't talk about it more openly. But for me, when I think of the word, I think about, two people who are in a committed relationship, you know, trying to do life together. I mean, that's the thing that I envision. But in the context of being a student in college, I think that's a different layer, like dating while being a student. So I wanted to ask you, did you date while you were a student? Why and why not? How was that experience? We could talk about both sides. Yeah.
Okay, that's interesting. I guess I'm a good person to talk about this. I purposely did not date, and the purpose, when I say date, I mean not going on dates, but trying to engage in an active relationship, basically. Just so that everybody knows the definition I'm using, because dating and relationships differ for everybody, how they identify it. But for me, as far as being in a committed relationship or looking for a partner of any kind, I purposely did not. I just thought that in university, it was kind of like a time for not only for me to kind of explore, but I also honestly assumed that everybody there was not looking for anything serious, because it's like a transitionary period of life. So I just assumed that. And I worked off of the level of I shouldn't be looking. And so I didn't.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, but as you know, in colleges, there's a lot of active, how can I say? Well, I mean, there's a lot of active hooking up that isn't categorized in the relationship world, right? And that a lot of people, I mean, it depends on the environment, I guess, of your university or college that you attend. But I think in general, there probably is quite a lot of a hookup culture versus kind of a more serious relationship one.
Right. Yeah. And thank you for clarifying that, because as you said, these terms mean different things to different people. that's also one of the reasons why it's difficult to talk about the subject, is because what I consider dating, or what I consider to be a relationship, um might be different from what other people are going to assume what it is, or like what they think it is. So I think that's like one of the core like differences, and like my understanding of dating might be different from yours. And so, as you mentioned, like depending on the college or like the university you went to, especially like particularly in the US, these things have different meanings. And as you mentioned, like like for instance, for me personally, like the school that I went to, as you said, like there was like, I mean, there were people in long-term committed relationships, but at the same time, it's like, I don't know, I feel like it was really hard, like even my friends who were in long-term relationships, to maintain that while being a student. I thought they had a harder time maintaining their relationship. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think honestly, I think like the hookup culture comes from that, right? I think it's really difficult to maintain that level of attention that you need to
Mm-hmm.
facilitate a committed relationship. That and so what ends up happening is people just kind of comfort themselves with like temporary,
Right.
fleeting kind of romances
Mm-hmm.
or attractions, because there's a lot going on. I mean, outside of obviously like your education, there's also a lot of social activities going on. I mean, this is also where you're trying to either make your plans or try to explore as many things that the campus offers. You might be also exploring a different city depending on if you've
Yes,
relocated,
exactly.
getting
Exactly.
to know your roommates, that in itself, trying to make friends, all of this is quite demanding, like, especially when
Yep.
you add on the actual, like, educational requirements as well. So, and then I think putting on top of that the kind of time and attention you would have to put or give your partner,
Mhm.
I think that's probably why people choose to not engage in that kind of a
Mm.
relationship.
Right, right. No, you're right. And as you said, like there are a lot of things happening while being a student in college, and a lot of firsts as well. You're trying to figure out how to handle your classes, you're trying to figure out how to, make new friends, and like try to assimilate into this new environment that you are a part of now. And having someone, um being dedicated to someone else might seem like a lot. And even for me personally, like you, I intentionally did not date while I was in college. And I think this is a, I mean, for me at least, it was a decision that I made consciously, like because I know like what I'm capable of. And I know for a fact that I would not I would not have been able to balance it all. Like I was struggling as it is, like let alone like add another person into that mess. Do you
Yeah.
agree with that?
Yeah, exactly. 100%. I don't think I had the mental headspace for that.
Yeah, and that's why like a lot of times, like I have like such huge respect to people who are still able to maintain their relationships, who are still able to maintain their good grades, and then still being able active, they're still active on campus, and then they still graduate, and you know they continue on with their relationships. Like I have so much admiration and respect for people who like know how to balance everything. Because I mean, at least for me, I was aware of my own limitations. And like that's why I was like, if I pursue this, like I know it's not going to end up well. You know what I mean? So I intentionally avoided situations where I would date. So I literally did not go on any dates. I didn't put myself in situations where I would meet new people, like unless if it wasn't for school or like for a club or like a student organization activity type of thing. So it was, so everything I did was geared towards like my school, and social activities were limited to my friends. And yeah, so I think that that was my own experience, and I'm sure like other people might also relate with that. But I wanted to ask you, like, why did you intentionally decide not to date, and do you regret deciding not dating in college?
Hmm. I mean, I think, I decided to not date because I didn't think people at that age would be capable of respecting the boundaries that a serious relationship would need. Just being
Mm,
honest.
wow.
And
Yeah.
in my opinion, if we weren't mature enough to have a serious relationship, then why would I be dating? That's my
I
thought,
like
at
that.
least. And as far as regretting it, I mean, you know what? I do kind of regret it. I do think
Mm,
that, um, don't get me wrong. Do I think that I would have met my future partner in university? Still don't think that.
right.
But I do think that dating overall is kind of practice. Um,
Mm,
I know that kind of sounds crazy, but I really do believe that practice makes you perfect, and it goes the same way for relationships.
mm,
So I think a lot of people, learn, even if it is at the time poorly done. I think they learn how to communicate with their partner, what they want in a relationship, as well as kind of how to define those parameters and boundaries during that time.
yeah.
And of course, again, what you want at that moment may be different in life, but I do think it gives you kind of a solid foundation.
Mm,
And so maybe by delaying me kind of venturing out and um, going on dates and being part of this like dating culture, as well as relationship culture, um, potentially could have like held back kind of some progress that I would be doing basically.
mm.
Don't worry, I've caught up since then. But
I'm glad you did.
but no, I think that again, I don't think that anything serious would have come out of it, but it could have been very interesting to see what happened.
Yeah, yeah. No, I totally get that. Especially the part where you said about practice. I feel like, um, as you said, like it might be weird thinking of it like that, but you have a point because, like, in everything we do in life, we get better at it the more we do it and practice doing it, right? And so then you learn how to do it better each time you do it. So I also agree. I mean, for me personally, I don't personally regret not doing it because I know if I was dating in college, I don't know, like for some reason I thought it was just gonna take so much of my time. And if I decide to do something, I want to make sure like, I give it my full attention and I'm just not doing it for the sake of doing it or like just because my friends are dating, I all of a sudden I'm supposed to date too. Because I think it also goes with peer pressure and particularly in college where, you're independent and you're facing all of these distractions at the same time and you see your friends going out with people going on dates and it is inevitable for you to feel like you're missing out on something, and I'm sure everybody kind of experiences this at some point in their college career. But I think do you agree with that?
No, yeah, no, I agree. I was just about to say, I think, yeah, no, I think you're completely right. I do think that that cycle repeats itself no matter what point of your life you're at, I don't
Mm-hmm.
think now as a grown up, I would like to say that I don't think balancing at least kind of your own priorities and dating gets any easier whatsoever.
Wow. Well, thanks. No, I'm kidding. But
Sorry.
no,
Maybe
no,
not
no.
what you want, but I
Yeah.
mean, that's kind of why I guess from my position, reflecting back, I see that, I'm not that I'm wrong. We're both not wrong when it comes to the amount of time that you need to dedicate for a relationship. But
Mm-hmm.
I think the thing is, you have to make an active choice
Mm-hmm.
either way, because your life is never going to slow down so that you can have a relationship.
Right.
It's about incorporating that into your life and being able to kind of multitask, give and take wise.
Mm-hmm. 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 That is a very valid point. And no, no, seriously, I totally do agree with you. I mean, when you think about it, it makes sense. Like obviously, as you said, like your life, you're not gonna stop doing what you're doing just because you're dating someone, even after college. And it's all about like, balancing your time and like trying to decide how much time to dedicate to your partner and stuff like that. But I don't know. For me personally, it's a bit tricky because college specifically is a time where you're also discovering yourself and you're trying out new things. And at the same time, when you try to do new things, like too many new things at the same time, I personally find it overwhelming. So I think that was also like I was apprehensive about that. Like, I didn't want to be involved in a lot of things and then just not enjoy it, you know. But there's also one thing that I observed, from just, you know, hanging out with my friends and talking about these things. You know, the people who did decide to date, you know, some of my friends, you know, a couple of years after college, I find out that they have broken up with their partners that I thought they were going to get married. And so that came as a huge disappointment to me, though, you know, because I was like, okay, you know, I'm so glad I didn't date. Because if I was going to end up breaking up with that person, then why would I, you know, dedicate so much time and energy? You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, no. I mean, that part I kind of agree with. I mean, I do know a couple of people who dated throughout college, like they were not single even once.
Whoa.
Um, yeah,
Okay.
and I think that's really bad. I mean, overall, I think that's very bad. I
Right.
think what ends up happening is that you kind of miss that opportunity to be alone with yourself,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and to make a discovery on your own.
Right.
Because it's like, I think with any successful relationship, you have to have your own kind of self identity, or have worked on and be comfortable with your own self, before you become part of a team or a duo of any kind.
Mm-hmm.
Um, whether, I mean, again, I'm not saying that people didn't learn from those experiences. More than likely they did. But
Mm-hmm.
at the same time, if you are going to be single, I do think that college is probably the best place to be single.
I know, right?
Definitely think that they missed out on that.
I know. And as you said, like, you know, it is a time for you to explore new things. And I mean, even for me personally, like before, um, you know, committing to someone else, you know, you have to know what you value. You have to know what makes you happy, and you have to know, you know, what some of the things that you like to do before, like, as you said, like, you know, before partnering up with someone. And I think that's one of the reasons also why I think I didn't date, was because, like, I first of all, I didn't know how to date. Like, that's also an issue, like, because growing up in Ethiopia and from the background that we have, you know how, like, you know, one of the biggest surprises for me growing up was when we were in school. It was school, right? So you have to study, like, no boys, like, you know, you're not even thinking about boys. And then you go to college, and then, like, there's this assumption, you know, from family and friends that, okay, you might be dating because now you're, like, by yourself in college and stuff like that. And then you graduate, right? And then the next day, people are like, where's the husband? And I'm just like, excuse me? Like, you didn't even tell me that I was allowed to date. You told me not to date for the longest time in my life, and now you're expecting me to bring you a husband. Like, how does that make sense?
It's magic. I mean, that's what the,
Like, make
no,
it
but
make sense.
it's common to everybody. I think that's the one commonality. I feel I've heard so many people complaining about that, where it's they haven't been given the tools. So basically, it's, you know, other people, like I said, practice, right? So they
Right.
practice when, even in high school, you know, they do the whole
Mm-hmm.
dating thing, or at least they
Mm-hmm.
learn how to talk to boys, should I say. Worst
Mm-hmm.
case, even if you're at the basic level. And we're told that we can't be seen with a boy, we can't be around the vicinity of one, you know, and then
Yeah.
go to another country to study for university where we don't even know the dynamics socially of how you do anything
Exactly.
either. So I don't know
Exactly.
about you. I definitely didn't know how to openly discuss my wants, or even like how to really even discuss these things with my friends at that time, you know?
Right.
Again,
Right.
a pro and con, I guess, about college. Like my friends definitely taught me a lot about how to be more comfortable with just like
Mm-hmm.
talking about, you know, whether it be like relationships, whether it be dating, sex, any of that stuff. I think like that's the time that I kind of developed like the confidence to discuss these things, you know, with
Right. Right.
friends, myself, even have these thoughts to begin with, you know, and know what
Right.
to do with them. And but then that doesn't make you an expert at dating, right? So in college you're still like figuring it out, or you decide, oh, I'm not going to date because you know what, this is too much right now. And
Mm-hmm.
then suddenly after college everybody's like, so come on, like produce. And I'm like, well, it would be very great if I had some sort of instruction manual, if we
Thank
could
you.
just pass that along somewhere. I
I
mean,
know.
traditionally it was a lot easier back in the day, right? You know, you didn't
Yeah.
go through like all of these steps to get to know somebody to the like deep levels that we now feel like we have to know people at, right? I feel like
Right.
before it was kind of more partnerships and matching rather than it was
Mhm.
like, let me know your deepest, darkest secrets. Let me know if you know you're going to, I mean, seriously, these are the
I know.
questions some people ask, right? Let me know if, you know, 20 years from now, you see yourself at the same place. Uh, so I think, I guess the parameters that we define our relationships are a little bit more stricter,
Mhm.
expect a lot more now. And to be fair, I feel like for our parents, etc., it would be a lot harder for them to kind of guide us on our own dating and relationship journey as well.
Mm, that is so true. Like I'm so glad you brought that up because like as you said, like it's different for us than it was for our parents. Like now the things that people value in a relationship or like when they're dating, the things that they expect out of the other person and the things that they bring in into their relationship, it's completely different. Like, you know, and now we're living in the age of social media and a lot of things that we see kind of like distort our own like expectations of what romances or like what relationships should be. And I think that's also one of the reasons, like I mean, for someone who grew up like watching, you know, Hollywood movies, you know, like I was having a conversation with my friend the other day, and we are talking about how, you know, this, you know, what, you know, how we were watching Hollywood movies like growing up, rom-coms, like they kind of ruined our expectations or like, you know, our just ideas of like what love should be like or like what dating should be like or like what the perfect person should be like. And I don't know, I feel like there's a big disconnect between what we fantasize about and then what the reality is. Do you agree?
100%. No, I can agree with you more, honestly. I do think that in general, over time, you realize that that imagery, and that probably honestly affects how we approach things as well. It's unfortunate. I think it's actually a very negative influence because it's not that you can't be happy, right? And in a more realistic relationship, it's it's just that that kind of happiness makes you kind of unwilling to explore other options or to explore the different dynamics that a relationship could have rather than the perfect or the idealized version of that, or the
Mm-hmm.
societal idealized, right? So, I
Right.
mean, of course, I mean, as much as maybe the generation before us didn't always get married for love, there are
Mm-hmm.
also relationships that naturally, you know, turned into amazing partnerships or that turned
Mm-hmm.
into love or that were also founded on love without the kind of like over dramatization of like of how of romance and all of the other
Mm-hmm.
things that come along with it, you know.
Mm-hmm.
um, I think nowadays, like instead of people looking for a good person or a person who kind of matches with their personality, people are looking for the whole shebang where they feel like it has to be a romantic adventure.
Right.
And if the whole relationship, or at least, should I say, the beginning part of the relationship isn't this whole romantic,
Mm-hmm.
perfectly, you know, prophesized and
Right.
story, then
Mm-hmm.
it's not how it should be, or it's not the real thing. And we miss out on opportunities that we can explore. And we also kind of block ourselves, you know, honestly, to the world and how we can approach it as far as like dating goes. That's how I feel.
Right. 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 No, I totally agree with that. Um, you know, I think at the same time though, like you need to be like you need to know yourself, you know. So I think that's also one of the one of the problems or like the challenges of dating in college is like you don't even know yourself, like you don't like that well, you know. You might know yourself a little bit, but there's this whole unexplored version of you that you have that takes time to like learn and appreciate yourself before like, you know, committing into a relationship with someone. And as you said, like the expectations that we have of the other person are also influenced by the society that we grew up in, by the college culture that we are in. And I wanted to ask you, like specifically for you, like while you were in college, like looking back, um, what were some of the things that influenced you maybe, or like what were some of the expectations maybe you had of, in terms of like dating and relationships?
Hmm. That's a very good question. Um, I don't know. I guess I thought that people would be more honest and forward. Um,
Right.
you know, I
Right.
mean,
Yeah, I get
there's
that.
nothing really to lose at being kind of forward with whatever you want. And I
Mm-hmm.
know a lot of people were.
Mm,
But this comes back to what you were saying about not knowing yourself or being uncomfortable with yourself, right? So
mm-hmm.
I guess I assumed that communication would be a lot easier. That's what,
Mm,
but I think it was one of the most difficult things. And granted, for me, I think I came out learning, and I still stick to this day, is I try to be as honest as possible in a
right.
relationship. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, just because I feel that that really stops miscommunications from happening.
Right. Right.
I'd rather
Yeah.
somebody actually not like what I say rather than it be construed in a different way, or all of these undertones or layers of assumptions because we're not communicating efficiently or saying our thoughts out loud. So I have stuck to this approach, and I
Mm-hmm.
think at the end of the day, that's probably what's going to get me to where I want to be, at least.
Right.
But I definitely think that that's what, I guess, took me back and surprised a little bit in college, just because
Mm-hmm.
you'd think like college kids are totally fine with just putting it all out there, should I say?
Uh-huh. Right. Yeah. No, no, you're right. Um, yeah, and thank you for sharing that, because even when I look back at my own experience in college, I think um like as you said, like the world would be a much more simpler place if people were more honest and more forward, as you said. But I don't know why, for some reason, especially like, when you're around that age, like communicating with someone like clearly, like how you feel about them, or like what you expect out of it, whatever it is, that if you're pursuing someone, for some reason it becomes like as if I don't know, it could be perceived as if you are weak, or like you're not, like there are like these games that people play. Like I do not understand these psychological games that people play, and I don't even have the time for that. And I don't, like, seriously, like it takes so much more effort to like play those kinds of games rather than just being honest and straightforward about your feelings, and like trying to set up boundaries, or like certain expectations, and having that conversation is better at the beginning rather than later. And I think that's also one of the things that I realized, like when I was in college, like I didn't see a lot of people who wanted to be in long term, like intentional dating kind of situations, like as you said, because college is like for a very short amount of time, like 4 years. So some people understandably do not want to like commit themselves to someone for that longer period. um but then I don't know, at the same time I feel like you miss out on certain things when you're only looking for like really short term reliefs here and there, you know what I mean? So I guess they're like both. um I don't know, but I guess I could only talk about my own experience, because I can't I can't really talk about other people's experiences. Yeah, what do you think about that?
Well, so I'm going to like summarize this into what I think in general kind of distinguishes a relationship. So, and I think that even after college, it's something that you continuously see. I think, what really determines the point is the level of your feelings. And I think a lot of people get confused by infatuation,
Mm,
um, which
let's talk
is
about that. Yeah.
something can pop up quite a lot, over
Mm-hmm.
your lifetime. Yeah, just doesn't really
Feel.
have a stamp, right? It's just like infatuation is kind of something that is really temporary, though, right? So
Mm-hmm.
infatuation is something that you might feel intensely, don't get me wrong, but is it actually something that can outlast, or does it have longevity in any format? Usually not. And I think the way that a person kind of behaves can be can kind of illustrate which kind of like attraction level basically it is. I mean, I don't think we do it
Yeah.
on purpose, but I think that
Mm-hmm.
there's definitely indicators to see if you feel something like more seriously, or if something is a little bit more kind of well defined in your emotional bracket rather than infatuation, especially
Mm-hmm.
I think in that age, there's a lot of infatuation.
Right, right. And just so that, we're clear, like, can you explain what infatuation is for someone who might not be familiar with that term?
So infatuation is basically, obviously, an emotion. So it's an emotion that you can sometimes confuse with love or
Mm-hmm.
everlasting, but it's more about the desire that you have for that individual, and it's very momentary and fleeting rather than
Mm-hmm.
long lasting and based or developed off of kind of a more structured
Mm-hmm.
from list of characteristics. So, you can be infatuated with somebody from just looking at them, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or for knowing them for a very short amount of time.
Mm-hmm.
But in my opinion, what develops like more of the context for true kind of, I was gonna say true love, and then I laughed.
It's okay. You can say that. There's no problem.
Sense of love, should I say?
Uh-huh.
Is, you know, understanding or getting to know that person, right? So with if usually that they're usually basically infatuation comes first.
Mm-hmm.
And usually people don't know that infatuation is fleeting. So people make a lot of decisions based on infatuation, or they give too much trust to infatuation.
Mm-hmm.
At least that's how I see it. I don't know. What do you think, Ruth?
Yeah, no, you're right. I mean, it's everything you're saying. I'm like nodding my head because I agree with you. And like, as you, but like, my question is like, how do you know if it's infatuation versus if it's like the real thing? Like, is it? I don't know. Like, that's also one of the struggles, I guess, of dating and trying to figure out whether you like this person or not. Is like, are my feelings gonna go away after a few days or weeks, or like, how do you know the difference? You know what I mean?
Well, if we figured that out, we'd solve half the world's problems. Um, but I definitely think, like you said, it's a combination of knowing yourself better
Mm-hmm.
and dating, right?
Mm-hmm.
So obviously with dating, like we said, it's kind of getting to understand not only not only what you want in a relationship, but also how the other person is. But also if you know yourself better, then you kind of are able to acknowledge when you've also met the right,
Mm-hmm.
criteria, found that right person, right? So you can
Mm-hmm.
like be aware of how your feelings are if you're more aware of yourself overall.
Right.
But I still think it's a very, very complicated line,
Mm-hmm.
in all honesty. Um, so I think it's really hard to tell,
Yeah. No, you're right. You're right. And especially like add to that, like on top of that, you're trying to, go to school, you're trying to study, you're trying to go to like different events, and you're trying to meet new people, meet new friends, and on top of all of that, you're still like, trying to date someone. I don't know. For me, that seems just like a little bit too much. But at the same time, as you said, there is also like a slight like part of me that was like, if I did date in college, like, would things have changed? Like, would I have changed as a person, or like, would that experience change me? And I guess we'll never know.
I guess we both will never know.
Mm.